Hey, Dr. Jon Finn here. Welcome to the Habit Mechanic podcast. Right now, you can get my new best-selling book, Train Your Brain for the AI Revolution, at tougherminds.co.uk. The digital book, audiobook, and physical book are all available at a special price that you won't find anywhere else.
In the book in chapter 19, you talk about improving exercise levels, etc., and various other issues around that. We'll move on to sleep shortly, but there's just one thing you say in the area of exercise, which I think is really fascinating and important. You talk about the rise of the use of exercise trackers and smart watches and all these devices which tell you how far you've done and run, etc., which are useful, but you warn people to be aware of what you call a licensing effect. I've done and I'll paraphrase, not something you say in the book, but something I kind of thought of. Oh, I've done a massive gym session. I'm going to have a protein shake and 10 chicken breasts now because I've earned it.
Yeah. So people. So if we go back to the base idea of intelligent self-watching, that is the key to making change. And the trackers give us a way to intelligently self-watch calorie output, but they don't give us a way to intelligently self-watch calorie input. So what the licensing effect is saying is that people are underestimating the calorie content of some of the foods that they're consuming, or they're giving themselves permission to consume because they think they've burned loads of energy. So people are maybe walking into work a few miles, and that means they burn 300 calories. But then to treat themselves when they get there, they're having a double chocolate chip muffin, which is like 700 calories and twice the sugar intake that you're allowed for the day. So we've got to be careful and monitor that, and that's one thing that I found really powerful. Actually, I've been using a new app in the last few months, which I found really good. It's called NutriCheck. It's just where you add your calories in, and just makes you aware. You educate yourself first of all about the calorific content of different foods that you're eating, the different and on the composition of those foods. Like one of the things I've noticed is just how much I'm always over on salt intake, for example, and I don't add salt to anything, and I eat pretty healthily. That surprised me, and it's always like 50% over, even when I'm trying. So that I exercise a lot as well, so I maybe counter some of that stuff because I sweat a lot. But yeah, I always find those things really educational. But if we're gonna intelligently self-watch calorific output, then we need to intelligently self-watch calorific input. And that's going to help us when we step on maybe the ultimate intelligent self-watching machine, the weighing scale. It's going to help us to get that needle pointing, all those numbers landing where we want them to land.
Yeah, well, that's a salutary lesson and a sobering thought as well. So I think that's a really great inclusion in the Habit Mechanic book. And just a brief digression from me, it's a different story, perhaps for a different podcast. But a friend of mine has developed a career as personal training, and some people ask him when he might do some strength work with them. Oh, do I need to up my protein now? And he does know. He doesn't have anything like your insight, but just say nope. We don't, because people assume they need to eat more. So yeah, it's so fascinating. Read more in the Habit Mechanic. Let's move on to sleep then. Finally, and in the book you write that if you want to improve mental health, well-being, performance, leadership in work and life, and by extension help reduce your stress, start by improving your sleep.
Yeah, and just as I open that page, I see a quote from Dr. Matthew Walker, who's the author of Why We Sleep, which is a deep dive. Matthew Walker is not an expert on how to help you to get more sleep. He's an expert on measuring the impact of sleep on brain function. So as fascinating as a reader's Why We Sleep is, it doesn't give you what's in our book, and certainly what's in chapter 19 about how to actually improve this. But I use a quote from him in here, which is, he says, "We are socially, organizationally, economically, physically, behaviorally, nutritionally, linguistically, cognitively, and emotionally dependent on sleep." In other words, sleep impacts everything that we think and do every moment of our waking lives. And also by default of our sleeping lives, because if you're not sleeping well, there'll be some negative impact on the quality of your sleep as well. It becomes like a big vicious cycle. So why is it important? There's a few different theories, and our understanding is changing all the time. One of the insights is that, well, sleep has two core functions. One is a recharge and a sort of detox type function, and the other one is a learning function. So one of the theories about the detox function of sleep is that the brain doesn't have a lymphatic system sort of drain away the rubbish that builds up in it. So it has to shut down in order to do that detox cleansing kind of process. So when we're sleeping, we're getting rid of lots of the unhelpful stuff that build up in our brain, and we're seeing some well, increasing amounts of data showing correlations and increasingly causal relationships between poor sleep and prefrontal cortex diseases like dementia, for example. So that's real. And it's about when you don't sleep well, you don't clear out that junk that builds up in your brain during the day. And one of the core things we're talking about in Stress Awareness Month is that we're getting more and more of that junk building up because we're getting more and more stressors. And our if we're not, and if you're stressed, you don't sleep well. If you don't sleep well, you get more stressed. It becomes a big negative cycle. And so that's one function of sleep. The other function is learning. Again, we think of learning, oh, if I was doing some exams, then that would be great, wouldn't it? Because I could improve how I was revising. But we're learning all the time. So when you sleep, one of the things your brain is doing, and this is connected to dreaming, is your brain is making sense and it's processing all the information that you've paid attention to that day, all the salient information. And you can think of, I often think about this now just as a metaphor, like the volume of emails that I get. I sometimes think, imagine if someone just walked into my office at the end of the day and put all that down as physical mail. It's just it's not manageable. It's impossible to manage. But I think we can use the same metaphor with the volume of information we're being exposed to. We're just being bombarded by information in a way that our brain is simply not designed to deal with. We're designed to live in little villages, in small little communities where we have a limited number of social connections and a limited number of information points coming our way. Now we live in a globally connected world where we're just being inundated with information, and that information, or the people who are running the information channels, are getting slicker and slicker at addicting us to go into those channels. So one of the functions of sleep is the learning function. Is we're making sense of all the stuff that's gone on, and you make sense of some of the stresses that have happened to you that day, some of the disconnections that you're seeing. But often what's happening is, and I think this is the biggest cause of people not sleeping well, is that by the time your head hits the pillow, you haven't. For me, the way I've best seen people deal with stress is they apply. It's almost like a factory. I've never used this metaphor before, but let's see how it goes. You can kind of see those factories where, let's just say that there is it's a potato factory, and these potatoes come out of the field. They've been picked by the clever tractor, and they go into the factory. The first thing that happens is we wash the potato. We wash the mud off the potato, and there'll be a machine that does like rumbles it all around, gets it all clean. And then there'll be another part of the factory that peels the potatoes, and then maybe another thing that slices it. But if we think of our experiences in the daytime through that potato metaphor, if we go to bed and the potatoes are still dirty and they're still caked in mud and soil, then our brain just does not have the capacity to process them when we're sleeping. So how do we get the soil and mud off? We need to do our focus reflection. We need to do our focus breathing. We need to use our stress management techniques. And then if we've got some of that mud and that dirt off and we've cleaned them up a little bit because we've done some deliberate reflection using the tools that we unpack in Destroy Your Stress in 5 Minutes course, and also some of those tools are in chapter 22 of the Habit Mechanic, also in the stress coach in the app as well. If we've done that sort of preparation work,
preparatory work. I couldn't say it. Preparatory work. Yeah.
Then when our head hits the pillow, our sleep brain can take over, and then it can sort of essentially tell a different. It helps us to wire in a different story about our experience as we sleep, and that's what dreams are. So when we're sleeping, we're not just learning about how to do long division or how to use the new AI bot that's associated with the software that we use, or how to solve a problem we're trying to solve at work. We are also learning how to deal with what's going on in our lives. But we're also learning how to build better habits. If you're trying to build a better habit, you need sleep in order to accelerate your learning. We've seen that very clearly in studies. So I always remember a big study when I was studying sports psychology, which was about basketball free throws, which is like a penalty, the equivalent of a penalty in soccer, although there's no one trying to stop. There's no goalkeeper, if you like, but it's a set piece play.
Like a free shot at the hoop, isn't it? I'm not a big basketball aficionado, but yeah.
A free shot at the hoop. And they were just looking at how do we speed up the learning of this skill in people. And they had different groups in different conditions. The condition that won, that made the biggest improvement, the main effect variable was more sleep. They slept more. And you actually see that now in some professional sports teams. So in a bit more in the European culture, but it has come here as well. I think like Man City have this infrastructure. You know, the players go for a nap at lunchtime. And part of that is to rehabilitate them physically, but also mentally. It speeds up their learning. But yeah, anyway, I go into more detail in the book, but sleep has two core functions: clearing out the rubbish that builds up, and also learning.
Yeah, and of course, you've highlighted how they can contribute to so many important things. One of which is, of course, managing our stress. In the Habit Mechanic, John, in the chapter, you list 18 ways to improve your sleep. Not going to go through all of them, of course, but just a couple, just to pick out briefly here while we're talking. which I think people will be interested in. And it's the first one, and it's it's the one that has the most text under it, I think, in terms of or certainly close to it in terms of the list. Develop consistent sleep patterns. That's important, isn't it?
Yeah, we run on habit, and actually consistency is a counterintuitive thing, because if you're inconsistent, you're still consistent. You're consistently inconsistent. I see this, got moving away from sleep, going back to my sports psychology stuff, where I created this tool called the pre-shot training system. It's about helping people to build better pre-shot routines. And people would say, well, I don't have a routine. And let's say that's in golf. And you say, well, you do, because you walk up to the golf ball, you set up, and you hit the ball, right? That's a routine. Oh yeah, I never thought of it like that before. So we are very consistent. We just have low self-awareness. But we need to build helpful consistency. So yeah, it's back to the habit idea. And you can be consistent. Your consistency might look different on different parts of the week. So my working week consistency or routines for sleep are different to the weekend. And I found a really helpful way to think about sleep as it's not about how much you get per night. Think about how much you get per week, because that takes the pressure off having a great night's sleep on any given night. And now, for many of us, because we work very flexibly, we can even top up with things like power naps during the day. And that's something that I use myself. Just 15, 20 minutes, get into bed like you would at night time, close your eyes, I set the alarm. I don't fall into a deep sleep. And that's the purpose of just 15, 20 minutes. But I've tried and tested lots of different things. For me, that is the optimal way. If I want to recharge, I'm not going to get anything better. I'm not going to get any more recharge done in 15, 20 minutes than by closing my eyes, and laying down. So, if you have a bad night's sleep, you can maybe top up with a power nap. But same at the weekend, you can kind of top up a little bit. You can maybe sleep a little bit longer at the weekend. So a bit like I'm thinking about, I said before about I'm trying to get 60 miles of exercise done per week, running and walking. Then you could think about the same thing with your sleep. How many hours of sleep do you need to get? The optimal length of sleep for you will be different, and it varies. Sometimes you feel like you need a bit more in the winter because there's less sunlight. Some periods of your life are more intense, so you need more sleep. So yeah, you've got to work out what's the optimal number for you, and then just work towards that. I'd say set a weekly goal and then break that down.
Yeah, that's fascinating. Just pick out one more of these 18 ways to improve sleep, which you listed in chapter 19 of the Habit Mechanic. Just one thing that really struck with me, and it's just a brief insight, which does not do any justice whatsoever to the depth and quality of the insights in the chapter as a whole about improving diet, exercise, and sleep. But this one, the point is take care with caffeine, and you cite that there's some data which shows there's a time for stopping your caffeine intake, which is a lot longer than I think some people will think it is.
Yeah. I personally, I am only drinking 3 caffeinated drinks per day. I'm stopping drinking caffeine by 4 p.m. in the afternoon, and I'm typically in bed at 9:30ish. Do I assign a length to that? Sorry, Andrew, you're saying?
Yes, I think in the book we cite 6 hours.
Yeah, it stays in your system for 6
which
hours.
you know, I know when you share that, as I say, it's just a brief insight. It doesn't do any kind of justice to the depth of insight that in the whole chapter about diet, exercise, and sleep. But just that alone, 6 hours. You know, people might think, oh, just a couple of hours, or you know, if I'm out for a bit of an early evening meal or something, I'll have a coffee afterwards. But 6 hours, goodness me.
Yeah, people say, people sometimes say, well, I only have decaf, you know, after 7 o'clock or whatever. But there's still caffeine in decaffeinated drinks, just less caffeine. So yeah, it's, you know, people don't understand these things, and getting a good night's sleep is a complex web. For me, at the heart of that web is stress. But that's why I list down these 18 ideas in the book. And I've tried and tested all these ideas. I mentioned habit mechanic, stress management, confidence building tools, which we unpack in chapters 21, 22, 23. But yeah, just got to try and test things out, and I've certainly benefited. I have better quality sleep now than I have done at any other time in my life, and I really prioritize my sleep. And it has a huge positive impact on my life. And you know, it takes us back to the brain states idea, the 25-hour brain. You've got to get that base level right, the recharge zones, and sleep, diet, and exercise are fundamental to that. And I'd say of the three, you know, sleep is the most important, because if you don't sleep well, you're less inclined to exercise properly. You're more inclined to eat junk food, and then you'll be less likely to sleep well the night after, because you'll be staying up late again, and you just start to build a bad habit. So for me, sleep is the most important. It is the foundation. I just want to thank Gary, who posted a comment just about just saying, I fully agree that activity can reduce appetite and make sense for you to remind us that is how we are made, especially when the activity is a bit hard. And this is the thing, people, we don't do things that are difficult, so that's why we resist doing them, because we want to save energy. So the key is to make these things easier. So you don't have to do 60 miles a week to start with. Just start with, well, you don't ever have to do 60 miles a week if you don't want to. Just start with an extra 5 minutes. Start with one push up. Start with one extra portion of fruit and veg. Start with 5 minutes more sleep tonight than last night. That's the type of thing we need to work towards.
Yeah, and well, what we've done on this session, I think, John, is take people through it in a really useful way: diet, exercise, and sleep. And of course, they can read much more in the Habit Mechanic. But that's been great. Now, we promised we would talk about how we can start to make positive, helpful changes in all these areas, and we're going to do that now. Of course, no replacement for the book, but at the start of the chapter, you talk about a world champion tennis player, specifically Novak Djokovic, who the example you cite doesn't specifically relate to improving diet, exercise, and sleep, although, as I understand it, Novak Djokovic pays great attention to certainly diet and no doubt sleep too, being a world-class athlete. But you talked about a D.E.S swap, and Novak Djokovic unknowingly has used part of that process, self-watching. Please tell the story and explain more.
Yeah, a friend of mine, a guy called Simon Briggs, is the tennis correspondent for the Daily Telegraph, a British broadsheet newspaper. So he, from time to time, gets to interview these world champion athletes. And he was just telling me that Djokovic was explaining how he monitored himself, how he monitored what he was doing and what he was thinking and his energy levels. And Simon Briggs put it to him, so it's like you've got this, almost like this CCTV camera on your shoulder watching what you're doing. He's like, yeah, that's it, that's what I'm doing. I'm watching myself in that way. And
And you use the metaphor of a CCTV camera in the habit mechanic and in your work prior to that as well.
Yeah, so that's why it was interesting that Simon had been speaking to him and he was talking in that way, and that's how we described it for a long time. So, so it's just a good example of someone that is, I think now he's the greatest tennis player of all time. He's using these processes and these techniques. So to package that into, well, how do we use that insight to help us to build better sleep, diet, and exercise habits? Well, the first thing we need to do is do intelligent self-watching. And I'm not going to go too deep into it in this podcast, but we have a tool called the Diet, Exercise, and Sleep SWAP plan. A SWAP stands for self-watch, make an aim, and make a plan. So this is an intelligent self-watching and planning tool that allows us to monitor our sleep, our diet, our exercise, and plan to make improvements. So we unpack this in chapter 19 of the Habit Mechanic book and show you how to create your own D.E.S swaps on a daily basis. There's also a digital version of that tool in the Habit Mechanic app, university app, which is really powerful. And once you've created a D.E.S swap, you can then package it into a habit building plan. So literally within 5 minutes, you can create a habit building plan. In other words, deliberately activate behavioral science that's going to make it easy for you to automate this new sleep, diet, or exercise habit that you want to practice. And we actually introduce the habit building plan in chapter 20 of the Habit Mechanic. We give an example of a sleep habit building plan example in there. So for those people that want to take the insights we've shared today and actually put them into practice, I'd recommend just having a go at the D.E.S swap, and you can do that in the book. This is a daily tool, really, really powerful. It's unique. I've never seen anything like it. Also, it's in the app. But remember, creating the D.E.S swap is one thing. To really supercharge your chances of success in changing your behavior, you need to create a habit building plan as well. And you can do that in chapter 20 of the book and also in the app.
Yeah, it's all there for people, as you say, John. Just briefly, if we, the D.E.S swap, as you've spoken about, and if we can just spend a few more moments just on self-watching, essentially, as many people will know now, having perhaps read the Habit Mechanic and follow these podcasts, self-watching, you ask people often to rate themselves on a scale from poor to perfect or 1 to 10. That's the essence of the process, isn't it?
Yeah, so it's moving ourselves away from dichotomizing our behavior as either great or rubbish. So we have this thing called the P2 scale, the poor to perfect scale, where we can label our behavior in a more intelligent way. Very similar to what we do with the T plan, where we rate ourselves out of 10. Similar to how we think about ourselves in the habit metric tools. So yeah, that's the starting point, and that's just helps us to be more intelligent in how we think about our sleep and our diet and our exercise.
Yeah, and it's the start point, as you say, for building those helpful habits in the area of our diet, our exercise, and our sleep. Well, John, we're coming to a close of this session. It's been so fascinating. I know you've worked with tens of thousands of people, and I think it's fair to say consistently diet, exercise, and sleep have been so important in your work with all of them. You must have seen a lot of positive results, a lot of positive benefits from so many people in your time.
Yeah, massive. And there's been a couple of noticeable ones just this year where I've seen people. There's a guy who's training to become a certified habit mechanic coach. And he signed up to the program about this time last year, actually, probably slightly later, but towards the end of last year, knowing that he wasn't going to start the program until the summer. So I hadn't seen him since, from December to the first time I then saw him again was in, I think, June. And literally when he came on the camera, I didn't recognize him. I was literally thinking, is this the same guy that I was speaking to previously? And literally as if he was reading my mind, he said, you might not recognize me, John, because I've lost, I can't remember how much he lost, but he lost a lot of weight. And I said, how have you done that? He said, I've just been using the D.E.S swap. So that speaks to how powerful these tools are. Just of his own accord, he'd just been using the D.E.S swap. So he'd been coaching himself, being a habit mechanic. And then another, actually, as someone who's a certified habit mechanic coach, he's talked about he's lost a lot of weight and improved his sleep and his diet and exercise habits, again, by using the D.E.S swap tool. So yeah, I've seen it over a long period of time. We have young people in school using these tools on a daily basis. So the tools are there. It's just about putting them into practice and you get the results.
Yeah, well, fantastic, and a fantastic opportunity for people to improve something which is so important to them. Well, John, thanks for your time once again. Absolutely fascinating and illuminating and beneficial for us all to talk through chapter 19 of the Habit Mechanic. Really enjoyed it, and yeah, I'm going to revisit the chapter myself, I think, and just go through some of those amazing insights. Anything you want to say to bring us to a close?
Just thank you to everyone for listening, and remember, you're only ever one habit away. Thank you to everyone for joining us, and bye for now.
Thanks for listening to the Habit Mechanic podcast. If you liked it, please subscribe and tell someone else about one of the ideas or insights that you found most interesting.